Hello, welcome again to FairtaX Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
I'm Bob Scarborough.
And our
I'm
guest is
John
John.
Gator.
There we go.
Yep, there
It's
you go.
John Gator. You may, and we are the FairtaX guys. I've got to have the Fat Albert cube, and there's the scrolling banner, and we are set to go. All right. Well, John, thank you so much for joining us today. We have got a lot to talk about here. In fact, it's going to take at least two, possibly three episodes to get through everything that we need to talk about. But I'm going to start off with something. Now, you used to live in Texas, no longer live in Texas, but you still keep a pretty close eye on what happens there in the Lone Star State. And you got to be really happy with the result of the Republican primary for House District 2 up there.
Yes, Steve Toth won that one. We had Crenshaw was our representative there, and he was. A lot of people there just say he was bought and paid for. He was part of the establishment, and we couldn't depend on him to vote the way Texans wanted him to vote. He was going to vote the way the House leadership wanted him to vote. And so he's had a couple of challengers through the years, but Steve Toth came in and just trounced him good. So, and he had, by the way, been an opponent of the fair tax, whereas Steve Toth has signed the fair tax pledge. So
yes, yeah,
you
turned us on to talk. You turned us on to talking to Steve here a few weeks ago. And we asked him flat out, will you co-sponsor the fair tax? He gave us a one-word answer. Yes, I will.
Yes. Right.
But you talked about people who originally opposed the fair tax. You were actually one of those. And for people who are not familiar with your story, recount briefly, if you would, how you came to be converted from a fair tax skeptic to a solid, one of the most prolific fair tax supporters in the country.
Well, it started when I heard of the idea of a sales tax. My reaction was kind of common for a lot of people. A sales tax, that's not going to work. It's regressive. That was my first thought. It's going to be regressive. And so I started doing some research. I was going to write an article. I had a website that I maintained at one point in time, Action America, and it's still out there as an archive site, but I haven't posted anything there for years. But I was going to write an article just blasting it because I figured it was going to be easy. It was a sales tax. Well, the more I researched, I figured I was going to research it for maybe 3-4 days, a week. And like 6 months later or so, I don't remember the exact time frame, I'm a fair tax supporter. I mean, I kept reading, and the more I read, it was like, well, wait, well, what about this? Well, what about that? Well, and I'm a researcher. That's what I do a lot. And so I looked at all of this stuff and kept reading, and the next thing you know, I wrote that article, and it was the most glowing article for any tax policy I'd ever written. So it was a process that it took, from a week to a month to like 6 months or so, something like that, before I finally got to that point. But that's also kind of how I learned about tax policy in general. I applied what's called a goals-based analysis, and it's how businesses do things. It's like when you buy a car. Well, I want a car, I want it to be a light color, white. I want it to be light blue or light gray. I want it to have these features and that and the other. Well, you're not going to find exactly that automobile, but you have goals. And whether you think about it or not, you're using a goals-based analysis to buy your car. You decide, okay, well, it doesn't have this, but it has this other feature over here that I like. So they're kind of a wash. And that's your goals-based analysis. And basically what I did is applied a more formal thing where you write down a list. And my list was 22 goals for tax reform. And initially, I think it was like 16. It's now up to 22 with suggestions from people from my books that have read my books. I said, why don't you add this? Why don't you add that?
Okay, well, I see that, again, these are not partisan talking points. This is just common sense from somebody who says, all right, if we could design the best tax system possible, what would it look like? what are the goals? And back to
Yeah,
doing cars, if you need to haul lumber, you're not going to buy a Ferrari. Okay. So if you need something simple, you're not going to have an income tax.
right. What I did was I came up with 22 goals for the tax deception. That's this. You can't see it. There we go. The tax
There you go.
deception. Yeah. And I didn't tell it that I have a green screen. Anyway, those goals are clear and simple, transparent, unintrusive, fair to all, untax the cost of living, border adjustable, increase compliance, tax cryptocurrency gains and spending. That's a big one, very big, in fact. I'll get to that in a minute. And reduce compliance costs, reward savings and investment, tax the illegal economy, repatriate offshore jobs, repatriate lost wealth, encourage foreign investment, residency based, make favoritism difficult, revenue neutral, stable revenue generation, have a chance of becoming law, make raising rates politically hazardous, end behavior modification via taxes, and of course end the weaponization of the tax system, which we've all seen. So
All right.
those are the 22 goals.
Again, they're not partisan talking points. They just sound like plain common sense things that if you were going to design a really good tax system, that's what it would do. And of course,
Yes.
this tax deception is not your first book on taxes, but you have
No,
this is
that's
probably your most comprehensive one.
right. This was The Rich Don't Pay Tax, or do they? Yeah, there it goes. And
Yeah, I got the same
that,
thing. If you hold something up in
yeah,
front of it and you move it, it disappears.
yeah. I have a green screen, and if you tell it you have a green screen, it won't do that. But it doesn't know that I have a green screen. I didn't set it up beforehand. So, but
Oh,
anyway, yeah, I started off with 14 or 16 points in The Rich Don't Pay Tax, or do they? And it was just a side note. And I got a lot of comments from people saying, hey, why don't you do something with that list? And so, based on things I got from readers, other suggestions, that list now has grown to 22 goals. And of course, you can, if you want to do it yourself, read the book. You look through there and you say, well, I've got another goal or two. Create the goals, use the process that is used here in the book, and you can compare it against any goal, add more goals, do whatever you want to, and compare it. You will find the fair tax meets or exceeds every goal that you can come up with, just about.
all right, Scarborough. I see the wheels turning in your head. What you got?
Well, we've been, we always have, and you follow along on, John, on social media, and you see some of the comments that are out there. Folks say, well, we can't, we don't need any income tax. And we know the answer to that. Something a little more complex is with the tariffs and everything. Folks say, oh, the tariffs are like they were prior to the income tax. As simple as that sounds, it's a bit more complicated. I want you to go back to your first day when you were thinking, who told you about the fair tax? Did you stumble upon it in your reading and research? And what was the one thing that turned you to say, had you say no to the fair tax when you first, started looking at it?
Well, I was just doing normal tax research. I was writing a lot of various articles on various subjects at the time. And when I found the fair tax, my first thought was sales tax. Sales taxes are regressive unless they have what the fair tax has, the prebate. Well, when I found the prebate, I said, oh, well, okay, but there's still plenty of other problems. And one by one, using a goals-based analysis, I kept eliminating those problems until after a time period of months, what turned out to be a 1 week project turned out to be several months, and I was a FAIRtax supporter by the time it was over. But it
All right.
was the sales tax thing was what got me, because I didn't know about the prebate.
All
And
right.
I think
Let's.
I just one more follow-up question. I think that's where people are right now. And when I look on social media, orbiting around some of the FAIRtax social media pages out there, people are not doing a due diligence effectively enough to come to a point where they've convinced themselves, like you did.
Yeah, it
How
was
do you
due
go
diligence.
about
That's a good phrase. That's exactly what I did.
how do you as an individual who's done the due diligence, obviously, and written books about it, how would you talk to somebody who came back with a knee-jerk reaction? Oh, it's not going to work because whatever.
Well, I've actually done a number of videos for candidates to, give people the talking points. But it's like, my reaction is, okay, what's wrong with it? Give me what's wrong with it. One of the things you're going to say is wrong with it is going to be one of these 22 goals.
Right.
I addressed that goal. Now, what's wrong with it?
All right. Well, let's start with
it's
the. Let's.
this, and it does not untax the cost of living. Yes, it does. Oh, it's not fair to the poor. Yes, it is. And I can go through each one of these things. I just let somebody tell me what's wrong, and then address that one issue. Now,
Well,
what's wrong?
let's start at the top of the list. And I think the number one goal is indeed, if you're ranking them according to importance of what people want to see in a tax system, clear and simple. Uh,
Yes.
of all of the alternatives out there, there's one clear winner on that point.
Yes. Well, today, according to the Commerce Clearinghouse, the CCH Standard Tax Reporter, that's the gold standard for accountants to use to find tax law. And according to them, right now, the Federal Tax Reporter is 449 volumes, made up of 908,521 pages. There's nobody has tracked it. Nobody really knows. The IRS doesn't even know. There's somewhere between 400 and 700 possible IRS forms to choose from. Now, you may only use one or two or three. Most complex forms may use 30. But you have to know which one of those 30 forms to use for your particular taxes.
Yes.
The
Publication
FAIRtax
17.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
The FAIRtax is 132 pages long, printed pages long, and that's it. The only forms that you're ever going to have to fill out, two forms. You fill out one form, and that's the form that tells you, the government, the size of your family. That determines your prebate. That goes to the Social Security Department. Well, they already have that information, so they just cross that information. It's very easy to cross that information and make sure it's accurate. The other form is the form that businesses send in, and it basically amounts to 3 lines on the existing sales tax form that they're sending in monthly to their state, what do they call it? STA, the Sales Tax Administration Authority, STAA is what it's called under the FAIRtax. And every state has one except for 5. 45 states already collect sales tax. So for those states, you'd have 3 extra lines on your form. And if you are not in one of those states, then you're going to have a card that's maybe got 5 or 6 lines. That's it. So that's all you're reporting. The sales tax that they're reporting to the states stays the same. All that you have to do as a person, individual, is file a form once a year saying, yep, my family's still 4 people, 2 adults and 2 children, or whatever it is, and that's it.
Address, if you would, how the value added tax fails this clear and simple goal.
Well, value added tax is basically that they call it a consumption tax. and in a way it is, but it's collected at every phase along the way. So company A sells to company B. Well, they have to have a value of what company A increased. Well, the tax is paid on that by company B. Well, company B adds value, and then they have to pass that along to company C, who sells it to company D and E and F, and it finally becomes a Ram truck. But every company along the way, it becomes an iPad, it becomes a clock. Every company along the way in that process has to calculate, okay, how much value did I add? And this can be very complex, and you have people paying all along the way, just like business income tax. You've got more and more forms. Under the fair tax, you have one form, and that's the tax that, well, two, if you consider that the yearly one that you send in. But the businesses have one form, and it's basically 3 lines on the existing form in 45 of the states.
That's it. All right, let's look at point 2, transparent.
Yeah, transparent. Yeah. Today, under the income tax, depending on what the product is and which economist you're listening to, embedded taxes can be between 17% and 23%. You can get a little bit maybe on some wider size, wider range, but I try to narrow it down as close as I can get. And again, it depends on what process you're looking at. Products that have fewer stages in the production may have less embedded tax, but around 17% is going to be the low end based on what the anti-fair tax people say. And 23% is going to be the high end for complex products based on what fair tax proponents say. So, but somewhere in that range, you're paying 17% minimum. Then you've got individual payroll taxes, that's 7.65%. You've got business payroll tax. They say, oh, well, wait a minute, businesses pay that. No, they don't. They add it to the price or they take it from your payroll. You are either paying less, you're being paid less so that business can pay that tax, or you're paying more for the products. And based on businesses, some businesses take more out of payroll, some businesses add more to the price, but you're paying that extra 7.65%. So that's 15.3%. Added to the 17%, let's just drop that down to 15%. So we're up to now 30%. Under the fair tax, we've got 23% at the cash register, and more than 70% of taxpayers will receive rebates that will cut that in half. So more than 70% of taxpayers under the fair tax will pay less than 11.5%. Some will pay zero, which we'll get to that in a minute, the people that pay zero, because it actually does untax poverty, but we'll get to that one later.
All right.
Goal number 3 is it's unintrusive. I like that part of it.
Yeah. The IRS knows everything about your finances. They know what bank you bank with. They know how much your house is worth. They know what cars you drive. They have access to everything. And when you have a transaction that's over a certain size, you inherited $50,000 from great Aunt Matilda that you didn't even know in your life, but you were the only person there, and so you inherited that money. Suddenly, the bank has to fill out, under IRS regulations, they have to fill out an SAR. That's a suspicious activity report, and send that to the IRS. Well, when that SAR gets there, it gets spread out. It goes to the FBI. It goes to the Treasury Department. It goes to a dozen different agencies. And so now all of a sudden, because you inherited money from great Aunt Matilda, you're being investigated by 10, 15, 20 different agencies. And that's intrusive. Why should that happen? So the fair tax part of the fair tax, the bill, is that all of the existing IRS records will be destroyed. The IRS hangs around and closes out business, but all those records will be destroyed except those that are ongoing open investigations. And anything that's closed and there's no criminal referrals, those records get destroyed too. So under the fair tax, there is no collection of those records. There can't be, because there's no IRS to collect the records.
Mm-hmm. Well, it has always made me uncomfortable knowing that the government knows, so much about me, especially when we saw a while back, there was this proposal. Somebody put up the idea, well, the IRS knows so much about you already. You don't have to pay your income tax. The IRS will figure out what you owe and send you a bill. Now, I tell you, there cannot be anything more dangerous in my mind than the government just having the authority to tell you how much you need to pay.
Right.
And
they know that information. That's right.
Yeah, it's crazy that they know that. I mean, yeah, the IRS the government knows more about you than you're comfortable telling your kids.
Right.
It's
crazy. In fact, I read something, and it must be true. I read it on the internet, but somebody was proposing that the IRS knows more about you than your credit reporting agency. Is it true? I don't know, but I read it on the internet. But
I don't like the idea that the government knows so much about it, and we are heading, headlong into this cashless society. Before long, if those folks get their way, every single penny that you spend, there will be a trail that the government can get their hands on and see exactly what you are buying, who you are buying it from. And I guarantee you that when everything is cashless, there's everything goes through a card now. The government will end up deciding what you can and can't purchase with your own money, how much fossil fuel, for example, you're allowed to buy every month. It is insane the degree of intrusiveness into our lives that the government is actually seeking under, of course, the banner of, we're just trying to make this easier for you. I mean,
right. And
that's crazy.
And it changes every 2, 4, 6 years when Congress changes.
True.
What they want to give protections to changes all the time.
Oh yeah, that's every week here on FAIRtax Power Radio, except when we have a guest, we take a look at what the Congress critters are trying to do to the tax code, and it is insane, some of the stuff we uncover.
Yeah, they're crazy. Yeah. So let's go on to the next one. Fair to all.
Right. Proceed.
Fair to all. Right now, latest data out. I watch a spreadsheet that the IRS publishes every year. The new one just came out 2 days ago. But historically, the top 1% pay between 1.74%, or roughly double their share, 1.74 times their share to 2.11 times their share. It varies from year to year. Interestingly, and I don't know if this is because of the people intentionally doing it or not, but when Democrats are in office, the top 1% pay less. That 1.74, right now we're looking at the 2023 tax data. That's the latest one that just came out. Who was president? A Democrat. It's 1.83 times their share. When Trump left office, it was almost 2 times their share. It was like 1.9 something. So after the first term, we won't get to his because the IRS takes so long to close their books. But so the top 1% are really paying more of the tax, and the poorest right now still paying those embedded taxes, the 15.3% payroll tax and the embedded 17 to 23% tax, embedded taxes. So that's not fair. Under the fair tax, we have a nice smooth curve. Well, if you're looking at the screen, I guess it would be more like this way, okay, with 0 being down here. And people that are living at or below the poverty level pay zero fair tax. Those people, as they begin to pay more, as they begin to spend more, they pay more. But if you look at that curve, and I posted a chart out there on a lot of the FAIRtax sites that shows that people earning around $80,000 a year, I think it is, are in the top 70. The bottom 70% of taxpayers. If you make less than that amount, you're in the bottom 70%, and you will pay less than 11.5% fair tax net after the rebate. Only those people in the top 30% will pay more than 11.5%. That's based on income instead of sales, but that's people that don't have the income aren't going to be spending anymore. So it's pretty fair.
And you hear these people saying, "Oh, this fair tax is going to make everything you buy 30% more expensive." That's just
Well, yeah. The one of the interesting things that I found is that the anti-fair tax people want to use tax exclusive to measure the fair tax, but tax inclusive to measure the income tax. And those two numbers, they produce the same amount of dollars, but it sounds worse if you use the tax exclusive number. It sounds better if you use the tax inclusive number. So we get to say, we're doing it tax inclusive on your income, but we're doing it tax exclusive on your fair tax. They try to do that to make it sound different. It's the same amount of money.
Indeed. Well, I'll tell you what, our time is getting away from us. We are talking with the author of the book Tax Deception, John Gaver, and he has got 22 goals for what a good tax reform or what tax system should look like. We've gotten through the first 4, so it's going to take at least 2 more shows, I think, to get through everything. But we're going to have to leave it right here for this week on FAIRtax Power Radio. John, thank you so much for your time and your effort to join us. We will see you back here again next week, and we will pick up with point number 5. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Read the book. That's the 22 goals we're talking about is in the book. And
all right,
we go through every one of them.
So go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble, wherever you get books from. Check this out. We have got to run for this edition of FAIRtax Power Radio. We will be back next week, same time, same channel, with John Gaver again and continue the list down the 22 goals for tax reform. But until we meet again, I'm Bob Paxton.
I'm Bob Scarborough.
And I'm John Gaver.
And we are the FAIRtax Guys. Providing you the fair tax is the only truly fair tax. And once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
So what do you need from me to get these taxes collected?
Glad you asked, because there is a fair amount of information you need to be aware of.
That's your tax plan?
Oh, no, this is just the revisions for this year's tax plan. What I need from you is you need to keep track of all of your income, as well as any taxes that you've already paid, and also any gifts that you received or gifts you've given to churches or charities or individuals throughout the entire year. Do you do any side jobs?
Every now and again.
Great, because there's some more information about that right here. Everything you need to know right here. So just simply compile that, send it in to us. Be careful, make sure there's no mistakes. If we do find mistakes, or maybe we can fine you or, throw you in jail. So you might want to be aware of that.
And what do you need from me?
As an individual, nothing. As a business owner, or if you're doing side jobs, yes, you would have to collect taxes on that, but it's all right here.
Can I get a copy of that?